My name's Ruth Maxey. I am a URC minister. I'm a pioneer minister down in Milton Keynes. And I'm thinking about how we do church differently. We've all been doing church differently for nearly a year now, wherever you come from. But I think we need to be clear that different doesn't always mean better. I suspect I'm not the only one who is longing to be back seeing people face to face and not talking to a computer screen in my study. This last week, the sun shone and I was able to meet two of our community outside, sitting down for a coffee and chatting, and that was just brilliant. But what this pandemic has done is it has shaken everybody out of their comfort places, out of the places where we have been. And we've been forced to do things differently. And therefore, it's made many people begin to reflect on what is at the heart of church. For me, the core of church is a community of people trying to follow the way of Jesus. How we do church has to be about community, about relationship, and about following Jesus. I've been in Milton Keynes since summer of 2013. I was called to be a pioneer minister in an ecumenical partnership on the east of the city, into an area called Broughton and Brooklands, two new big housing estates. Over the last 7 years, a new church community called Church Without Walls has grown up and emerged. And I suppose we have been doing church differently right from the very start. Connecting with the local community is at the core of who we are. And alongside that, having worship that's really accessible and open to everybody. The theme through it all is about belonging before believing, but also creating opportunities for everyone to explore faith together. Our engagement with the community has often been through my involvement with local groups and partnership with them. Many of those who are involved in Church Without Walls I have met, and others have met through those connections in the community. Pre-pandemic, we were running things like language cafes, supporting the local community group, doing family fun days, big lunch, all those sorts of events. But even in the pandemic, we found ways to continue to partner with the community. And from next week, the gazebo is going to be back up again, and we'll be running a new mums group in partnership with the local children's centre. We also, during the pandemic, have encouraged people to decorate these wooden hearts with messages of hope to the community that they've hung up in the local churchyard. And we're planning to do some socially distanced activities over Easter, with possibly Easter gardens making under the gazebo, maybe crosses on the tree, and a whole range of other things. We've never had a building. So over the years, we've learned to be nimble in terms of our places. It's meant that the focus on people and the relationships at the core of what it means to be church has remained really, really strong. And when we talk about going back to church, we mean getting back together as a community. And I imagine that's what a lot of people in your churches will be meaning as well. Of course, what we did before the pandemic was already different to other churches. We had a 4-weekly pattern of cafe church, dinner church, forest church, and quiet church. Most were in different venues and moved around in terms of venues over the years, and each had a different focus. We've changed and adapted like everybody else during this last year, and we've had a lot of time on Zoom, which has had its advantages, but I would say particularly for families, as the year has gone on, it's been really hard to continue to be engaged with online stuff. We do daily prayer on Zoom, we run small groups on Zoom, we run our kids' groups, contemplative prayer, and so on. With no building to return to, we've had to think really differently again. And this has been really important, and I would say it's probably important for all our church communities. I could have got quite stuck in thinking about how could I do cafe church now in these different times. And at times, I think, like everybody, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole of trying to simply focus on what we did and thinking how we could now do it. But shifting my thinking back to the core, community and relationship, following Jesus, has enabled me to think differently again. As soon as we were able to begin meeting again outside, back in May or June, I think, we began first to meet one-to-one in the front garden under this little gazebo. And then once the rule of 6 came out, I remembered that I had borrowed some scout gazebos for a community event, and I asked if I could borrow them. And these 2 gazebos went up and started transforming everything that we were doing. I didn't think, how are we going to get back to what we did? I thought, how are we going to be in relationship with each other? And the rest began to emerge. Our teenage group started up again. We did our kids group under the gazebo. Our discussion groups happened, and as you can tell, we moved into the colder months with blankets and hot water bottles. We did Discovery Church, a trail like Forest Church for groups of 6 to do with reflections online and prayers online for them just to follow themselves. And then when we were able, we started Forest Church back again, but this time without breakfast and 2 different groups to spread out the numbers. We tried outdoor services in the nearby churchyard, and we began to explore a sort of gazebo church type idea under the gazebos. When our church community began all those years ago, there wasn't a big plan. I didn't come with a big plan. And it rather just began organically. And that's how it's been in this time again. We've gone back to that organically exploring and emerging, just taking the next little step. What's right for us as a community this month? What's right next month? And how can we be a community together as we try to follow the way of Jesus in this different time? So don't do things differently for the sake of doing it differently. But equally, don't spend ages thinking about how can we find a way of getting back to what we did do. Go back to the heart. Find ways to build relationships and connections that you have and rediscover the heart of being church again. I don't think people long to be back in buildings. They long to be back in relationship with each other, because church is a continual reminder that the journey of faith is a corporate activity and not an individual one. And so however great our online offerings are, if they encourage us to separate experience of faith, then we need to be cautious in our enthusiasm, and we need to find new and creative ways to connect, to be together, and to be that community of people trying to follow the way of Jesus.